What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the debut album by T.I. Basically, this project is called I'm Serious, and it came out in the fall of 2001. Now, the thing about it kind of is just this album particularly caught a lot of flack just because this is an album that got T.I. dropped from his label. Not to say it was poor or bad, but just the sales of this particular album just didn't really go that well. And I think the kind of reason, and I would have to say kind of the reason why is just the fact that I think this album is kind of ahead of its time. It's definitely a pretty revolutionary one. Just the way that music was kind of way back in 2001 was just different. You know, Dr. Dre was still kind of in his prime as far as that kind of went. Eminem was still, I mean, looking back, the fall of 2001 was pretty early for T.I. to kind of be around just as far as that kind of happens. This was kind of back when Dr. Dre was still in his prime. He had just dropped 2001. Eminem hadn't full blown reached his peak just yet. He still had albums like Eminem Show and like Encore to drop and things like that. 50 Cent hadn't happened yet. So there was just a number of productions. It was just interesting before like things started to flesh out in like 2000s kind of rap music where productions were kind of more stark and not necessarily boom bap, but just kind of a lot more just minimalist and just things like that. There just weren't, back in 2001, there weren't overly kind of predominant kind of sounds and productions as far as that kind of happened. I mean, the Neptunes were still kind of early. DJ Toomp really sounded early on here. There just were some ones that just kind of were a lot different as far as this kind of happened. So it's just interesting that this kind of was a thing. But yeah, T.I. was around as far back as 2001. And this was kind of one of the kickoff points for trap music, I would have to say. I can't think of too many trap albums for the most part before about 2001 between like 3 6 Mafia and folks like that, Gucci Mane, some of those type folks. But T.I. had dropped an album in the fall of 2001, just a little bit after 9/11 as far as that kind of happened. So as far back as like 22 years ago, stuff that there was some stuff that T.I. was trying to do around that time. And it's a good claim. You know, T.I. had said that he was the king of the South. And it's kind of, I mean, you would think that it was early on this particular album. But I think just looking back in hindsight, this is a pretty revolutionary album, just seeing as all the stuff that kind of happened, especially as far as trap music has kind of evolved since that point, I would have to say. There's a lot of folks that say, like, folks like T.I. and Gucci Mane. There was a lot of folks that say that T.I. and Gucci Mane and folks like that, maybe 3 6 Mafia, were some of the ones that polished out, like, trap music as far as that kind of went. But this is definitely some elemental type stuff as far as it kind of happened. Just a good kind of concept as far as getting that. But yeah, the album didn't sell that well. It only got to one single. People initially didn't like it and just kind of had a people just didn't initially like it as much, and he kind of got dropped from his label, and it took him until trap music to kind of flesh out the sound a little bit more. But that album is definitely a pretty good one. But I would have to say this is not a bad album. I just would have to say it's going to get a rather high score. I would say a year ago when I reviewed trap music, I kind of gave it like maybe like a 6 or a 7 out of 10. I felt like the singles were definitely good on trap music, but the album cuts were not quite as heavy. And I actually feel like this album hits heavier than trap music in terms of the album cuts. I mean, the productions are more minimalist and kind of more laid back and stark as far as that kind of happens, but I think it's just because T.I. didn't full blown have the budget. Just trying off the initial album, I mean, him just being 2021 and coming up on his own without many guests and not much apart from DJ Toomp and PSC and some of those type folks to really back him. It was just kind of the concept. This was some initial stuff as far as that kind of went. This with that sort of vibe. So it's just kind of the thing about it. But yeah, this is a pretty initial kind of quick flavored kind of album that just hits pretty heavily. And I just would have to say it's got some good vibes about it. This is definitely one to kind of have a history book of just some stuff that kind of helped initialize trap music. And it's just an overall, I mean, I could pretty much almost say it's pretty close to being a classic. I mean, I know that that's kind of arguable just because of the fact that it doesn't really have like the singles in terms of radio airplay and just stuff like that, but it did do a lot of revolutionary things. I would have to say it's just a pretty important project. So I'll go ahead and talk about the single on here. The single is the title track, I'm Serious, which has a Beanie Man hook on here, which is pretty awesome. This is definitely a nice song. This is kind of a low-key kind of initial hit from Tip, I would have to say. It's a nice poppin' kind of dance club bounce, I would definitely have to say, and it's very vivid for 2001, definitely, and this has a nice hook. So the song is very vivid for 2001, I would definitely have to say, and this has a nice hook. So this is definitely a pretty bouncy kind of one, definite nice one to kind of have. This is T.I. on more of like his dance club. This is kind of T.I. and more of like his dance club type stuff as far as that kind of happens. Just a nice popping kind of one to kind of have in that sort of. This is just a nice kind of popping one to kind of have in that particular aspect as far as that kind of goes. Just a nice vivid one as far as that kind of happens. I just would definitely have to say about it, just a real nice mean kind of song. It's pretty good initial hit, I would have to say, as far as this kind of happens. The initial single from T.I. as far as that kind of goes, just a nice one. Usually when you think of T.I., you think of songs like Top Back and, you know, you think of songs like Top Back and 24s and some of those type ones and Never Scared and some of those type ones as far as that kind of happens. Just some nice ones as far as that kind of goes. Rubber Band Man's another nice one. But I would have to say this is pretty much like T.I.'s debut single. I just would say it's a pretty hit song. This has a nice pop and kind of dance feel. Nice. It's almost kind of Jamaican oriented. It's almost kind of Jamaican tinge, but this works as like a pretty heavy dance bounce. So I like the concept of this. This is definitely good for 2001. I mean, considering the stuff that was out around this time, T.I. was changing. T.I. was kind of changing the sounds, and it just worked pretty well to kind of see that. So it's a nice one. Definitely one of the best songs on the album. So on this album, there's particularly 15 songs on here, and out of those 15, I wound up recommending to you 11. So the only four songs I don't recommend would just be What Happened, At the Bar, Grand Royal, and I'm Serious Remix. So to talk about those real quick, basically these are just kind of poorer ones. These are just kind of more minimalist productions. I really felt like the grandiose kind of vibe of Grand Royal was okay, but this didn't quite hit heavily enough as far as I was kind of looking for it. This was kind of a more kind of here and there kind of humdrum kind of one that just didn't work as well. It's the same thing with At the Bar. This was just kind of a poor production. I think the song topic was pretty good. I kind of feel like Do It, Stick It, Baby was just a better song for that sort of vibe at the bar. I was kind of expecting a song that was called At the Bar, which means and implies being at the bar, to be a little bit more heavy hitting, just a little bit more fun bounce. Definitely needed a beat like I'm Serious or What's Your Name or something like that, or Hotel even, but that one was just a poor one. I'm Serious remix was trying to be like a crunk tune that like Lil Jon kind of does. This is produced by Lil Jon, but it kind of has a riveting beat on there, but I don't know, it just didn't quite connect with me as much. I mean, it was just kind of a raucous kind of song that just didn't really have the vibes as far as what I was looking for. I mean, I like the fact that T.I. tried to do some Lil Jon type stuff, but just didn't pull it off quite as well. And then What Happened was kind of like What Happened kind of had like a paranoid type vibe that just didn't have enough appeal as far as what I was looking for, as far as that one kind of went. So that one was just kind of a dud, I would have to say. But some of these are definitely pretty good. There's definitely a nice one. Probably one of the best beats on this album, one of the best songs on this album is What's Your Name, I would have to say. This is produced by Pharrell. What's Your Name is one of the best songs on the album, I would have to say. This is a nice spice of a ladies song, I would definitely have to say. It's a mellow kind of swashed Backstreets kind of vibes it has, and I would definitely have to say the Neptunes do pretty excellent on here. So this is a pretty nice boppish kind of one. It's real kind of mellow kickback of a song, I would have to say. Just a real good vibe. Pharrell does a great hook on here. This is just some good vintage kind of Neptunes vibes that this is pretty good, and it's a good steal for T.I. to kind of get a song like this, definitely. I kind of read somewhere that T.I. wanted to have a lot more Neptunes beats on this particular album, but he just didn't have the budget for it at the time. So it's a good, interesting kickback that there was supposed to be more songs like this particular one, because this is definitely a good highlight, but I just think the budget wasn't entirely there to be able to do it. I mean, I definitely think T.I. was rich and probably a millionaire at this time, but he just probably didn't full-blown have the budget. But this is a nice one. There's a lot of good ladies songs in this particular album. One particularly nice one is Hotel with Too Short. This is a very smooth kind of kickback cut. This is a very smooth kind of kickback cut. I would have to say this has a vibey kind of polished hook on here, and this is just a nice dose of Southern rap. I would have to say it's a trailblazer, and it's just a very excellent kind of bass song, I would have to say. So it's just a nice kind of one that just works pretty damn well. This is just a nice, smooth one that just works pretty damn well. Just a very good highlight to kind of have for just a mellow kind of kickback. This is the sort of stuff that Ludacris was kind of doing on word of mouth back in the day, but T.I. nails it pretty well. He has a lot of good pimpish kind of songs on here that just have an extreme kind of vibe as far as that kind of happens. It's a real great song for some hotel kickback and just overall R&R type vibes that just work pretty damn well, I'd have to say. Another good ladies song is Choose You. This has Jazzy Faye on here, and this is like a more retro version of Let's Get Away from trap music, I would have to say. It's just some nice midday commerce. It has a nice midday commerce feel, and it's just a light kind of makeshift snap that it has, and it's just very catchy. So this is kind of one, or if you like Let's Get Away, but Choose You is a song that if you like Let's Get Away, this is like a more stark version of that, just a more retro and kind of more minimalist kind of version of that. So it's a definite pretty highlighted one. There are some DJ Toomp productions on here that work pretty well. Dope Boys is a particular nice one that kind of has that vibe. This is a nice kind of ride out tune, I would have to say. It's an amalgamation between 24s and Rubber Band Man from trap music, I would have to say. It's just a more retro and kind of original version of those particular type songs, I would have to say. And it's just a nice summer fun track, I would have to say. So it's this guy kind of vibey, kind of summery kind of beat. It's like a more retro version of 24s, that type of stuff as far as that kind of happens. It's a nice ride out kind of tune. There's definitely some good cruise out tunes as far as that kind of happens. Just some paced kind of ones, just in a more retro sense. And another one that's kind of like that is Heavy Chevys. This is kind of an out on the trail kind of southern fried bounce of a song, I would have to say. It's just got a nice bouncy kind of initial DJ Toomp type beat, I would have to say. And it's just a retro kind of bop. So some of these just feel like, I mean, the thing about these is they kind of feel more like Rubber Band Man more so than like 24s, but they just kind of have that good pitch of just being Dope Boys and Heavy Chevys just have like a good pitch of just being kind of ride out songs, just in a more rubber band man kind of sense. They just kind of have like those organs. These songs just kind of have like heavy organs on there. They just feel like songs that you'd hear at like a baseball game or just in like the summer weather, like June, July, something like that, just in kind of more summery type fare as far as that kind of happens. Just some great cruise out tunes as far as that kind of goes. These are just some real highlighted ones. And then kind of a surprising song for T.I. that I really liked on here was Hands Up. This is kind of like a Latin fried kind of residential party tune. I would have to say it's a nice dance cut and it's just an easy song to get bent to and vibe out to, I would have to say. So this just really feels like a Latin type song. Really like the vibe of this particular one. This really is a highlighted one that just works pretty damn well. This really feels like something that kind of have just in a more Hands Up. This feels like a song that Cypress Hill would do. I would definitely have to say this is just a nice highlighted one. Definitely a good vibe. And then Still Ain't Forgave Myself is a nice one. This is kind of a down in the dumps kind of personal cut. I would have to say it's a good change of pace. And I would say this song is a good change of pace. And I would definitely say that this song is like a hustler's kind of makeshift cut. I would definitely feel like so. This is kind of like a real kind of down. This song is just a real kind of sluggish kind of piano keys. Just really kind of morose kind of one, at least morose for 2001. I would have to say just a real kind of down in the dumps type one that just works pretty well as like a more kind of depressive type tune, but it just works in that sense. This song just works as far as showing T.I. and like some varietized kind of vibes as far as that kind of happens. So it's just a nice personal cut. And then I Can't Be Your Man is another highlighted one. This is kind of a spicy, kind of evasive ladies bop. I would have to say it's an easy, frenetic kind of evening tune, definitely. And it's just got a workaday feel with like some retro swag on there. So it's definitely kind of a frenetic one. This is another one that's kind of similar to Hands Up and some songs like that. This one, maybe not as much of a party tune, I Can't Be Your Man is, but it just kind of has like that makeshift kind of workaday type feel and just like a frenetic kind of evening sense. It's definitely good for some evening fare, just in a more kind of hazy type feel as far as that kind of happens. It's a real spicy kind of tune to kind of have for some bickering with women as far as that kind of happens. There's a lot of good ladies songs on here to talk about some of these. Choose You, Hotel, What's Your Name, I'm Serious, Do It. There's just some great ones to kind of have in that sense. Even At the Bar, which is a song I didn't recommend, is another one like that. But You Ain't Hard is kind of a nice boppish tune. This is kind of an out in the wind kind of city hopping gem, I would have to say. It's just a regular kind of sunny day feels that this song kind of has. And this is just a nice errands tune and it just has an overall workaday kind of vibe. So I definitely like this one. This is another similar one to like this is kind of a song that's similar to Heavy Chevys and Dope Boys, just a little bit more in like a more boppish kind of city hopping kind of fare as far as that kind of goes. So this is just a nice kind of one for like some summer fun. Yeah, so You Ain't Effing a nice one for some city hopping. And then Do It, then the song Do It, Stick It Baby is another good highlight on here. This is a nice one, but it kind of has like a learning curve of a beat to kind of get used to. This one's not one of the album's best beats, I would have to say, but it's still a pretty good one. This is kind of a bleary, kind of quick dance club and night out fare, I would have to say. The production is kind of skeletal, but when you're drunk, it's kind of less poor, I would have to say. So this is just kind of one I kind of feel like was trying to be like a heavier hitting type one, like with this is a song that's trying to be like a heavier hitting party type cut that's like on T.I.'s later albums as far as that kind of happens. But this one just I mean I like this song and I recommend it, but it was kind of almost an almost song just because the production is just kind of somewhat skeletal and just kind of has like a learning curve as far as getting used to it. But it is pretty much one of like the most riveting songs on the album in terms of like the lyricism and the overall feel of it. It's just the fact that the production is just not quite as heavy hitting, I just would have to say. But the overall vibe of it definitely suggests that this is like a song to really get cranked and turned up to in a lot of ways. It just kind of is the fashion that the vibes and the energy behind it is just more powerful than like the production fare, but it is a pretty nice one. So that's this kind of thing. But to talk about this, so me basically recommending 11 songs out of 15 on this particular album, I'm going to go ahead and give this album like a 9 out of 10. It's really that good. It's revolutionary, did a lot of things right. It has a lot of good vibes as far as that kind of happens. This was a trailblazer, just did a lot of things, had some good nightlife as far as that kind of happens, some decent makeshift on here, a lot of good ladies tunes with some fun stuff. For the most part, the production is about the only real true caveat of any sort of weakness, but for the most part, it does hit. It's just kind of in a more stark fashion. And it's just, this is a project that can win you over just because it's revolutionary. That's just kind of the concept about it. Just did a lot of things. There weren't a lot of albums like this back in the day, and this is kind of like I was saying, like a trailblazer. So it just wins that originality as far as the things that were kind of around. And this is better than a lot of stuff that was around back in 2001, minus like, you know, maybe Eminem, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg in like his best cases. But I would have to say this is cream of the crop here in terms of 2001 fare, I would have to say. But the Social score, I'm going to go ahead and give the social score like a 9.5 out of 10. I feel like it's just pretty boppish as far as that kind of happens. I would almost give it a 10, but didn't really have like a second single, and T.I.'s budget at the time. The label just didn't trust what was going on with this, so they didn't really have belief in him. So he only got one single, and it just kind of came and went as far as that kind of happened. He got dropped from the label as far as that kind of went. So I just would have to say it gets a 9.5, but there's a lot of good social fare on here, a lot of good ladies tunes, some summer tunes, some cartoons, just some overall kind of rompish, kind of boppish type tunes for stepping out in that sort of sense. So it's just got some good fares. I just would have to say, in terms of future, like supposedly T.I. is retiring, but he does have way more albums I'm going to get to, definitely. So there's going to be some more of these I'm going to start talking about soon enough. We'll get to a lot of these, but this is pretty much like a pretty damn near classic debut, and it's definitely revolutionary, I would have to say.